Let's say there is an abandoned rail line in a city. This abandoned rail line parallels extremely congested roads and transit corridors, has the potential to slash substantial commute times for residents, and open up new transit capacity in areas that need it. In other countries, this train line would have been reactivated long ago, and residents would take this train line for granted. Unfortunately, that is not the case for New York City. And not only has this train line not been built, which is already bad enough, NIMBYs are extremely close in blocking any transit on this branch from ever materializing. Well, time for me to talk about Queenslink and Queensway again. Now, a recap for those who haven't kept up on this. We have this abandoned train line in the center of Queens. It is called the Rockaway Beach Branch. There are two competing ideas for it. The first one is Queenslink, and is the correct idea, which is to reuse this for a subway service and a park. The second one, which is a stupid proposal, is Queensway, and would turn this into only a park. This is pretty much a case of one side having all the facts and the other side having nothing. One side, Queenslink, will meaningfully address transit needs in Queens, such as decongesting nearby roads on Woodhaven Boulevard and Van Wyck Expressway, adding transit capacity in areas like this, and cutting commute times by 15 minutes one way. The other side, Queensway, is all cosmetic. But that has not stopped Queensway from lying. They keep lying about, the MTA said that this would cost $8.1 billion, even though if they just went a little bit deeper, they would find that the MTA used a 77% soft cost to total cost ratio, despite their most egregious example at the time clocking in at 29%. They kept lying, saying that the ridership of Queenslink is low, when the MTA modeled that based on the assumption that they can only run a train every 10 or 15 minutes for no apparent reason. They keep lying, saying their park won't block the train despite them knowing that parks will be weaponized by NIMBYs to delay transit, like the Beltline in Atlanta. But that didn't matter, because those lies are effective, convincing the political establishment to auction off a valuable right-of-way to NIMBYs that want to make sure trains will never run on the branch again. You had Andrew Cuomo give $100,000 to study Queensway. You had Eric Adams to fund the Metropolitan Hub. And if that isn't enough, you have Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, who both should be primaried, kicking $117 million to expand the mistake to the northern half of the Rockaway Beach Branch. But then, Cuomo lost the primary and the general election in an embarrassing fashion to Mamdani. Good. Mamdani was a strong Queenslink supporter during his time in the assembly. Here's a clip of Mamdani's speech in a Queenslink rally in 2023.
The fight for public transit is a fight for making sure that every single New Yorker has their God-given right to go around every single borough of this city. This is a fight of immense importance. Who is here for that up?
And even up until last year in August, was quoted saying Queenslink is something that would continue to be important to him. So why is this guy doing a 180 and funding Queensway? Well, Queenslink did get a meeting with the mayor's team, and after that meeting, two things were apparent. The first is that nothing is set in stone, and that there could be changes. The second is that Mamdani and his team became the latest victim of Queensway's propaganda, as they went to the EDC and the Parks Department, where they fell for MTA talking points about how this won't block rail reactivation. Because nothing is set in stone, and the mayor's team is still open to changes, let's review why Queensway is going to block Queenslink. Queensway is a park. When was the last time you saw some heavy construction that demolished a park for something else? Chances are, it is slim to none. That is because parks are a political liability to tear down. Take the Beltline in Atlanta, where NIMBYs have used the park to block transit reactivation multiple times, saying that the train will bring danger, noise, pollution, and congestion to the park. Laugh all you want, but these slop arguments have sway over the political establishment in Atlanta, which time and time again delayed the project for more than a decade at this point. The thing was, the Beltline had space left over for rail, as Scott from Urban Man points out. Queensway does not. This means instead of relatively simple work to install the rails, the entire Queensway structure would need to be removed and rebuilt if Queenslink was to ever be a reality. That is what the MTA plans on doing, which means all the work in building Queensway will be wasted. $46 million flushed down the toilet that could be used for other parks. And you think this decision is going to be popular? Of course not, because once again, losing a park is something the community does not want, even if they are promised one later. Just recently in Manhattan, city officials wanted to build affordable housing on the Elizabeth Street Garden. Saying that the community revolted against that is an understatement, even when a park was promised alongside this development. So much so that this became a city park, made impossible to develop unless the state authorizes it to do so. And whatever your personal opinions are on the Elizabeth Street Garden, one thing is certain: "Don't remove our park" is an insanely effective rallying cry. Which is why, if you want parks, you build it with the train to minimize incidents like this. That is why I found it particularly tone-deaf to see a spokesperson for Mamdani saying that they were committed to look at areas to expand green space in response to the Queenslink and Queensway question, because they completely missed the entire point. Queensway is a deliberate attempt to block transit, something that this administration supposedly cares so deeply about. Not to mention, this is Central Queens. Forest Park, one of the largest parks in the city, is right there. And you're telling me, oh yeah, we're looking at ways to expand park space? Like, why aren't you telling us we are looking at ways to expand subway service? It isn't like Queens has some of the most congested subways and roads in the city. Oh, wait. Now, some of you will say that Mamdani made a hollow promise because the mayor has no authority over subway expansion, and you would be completely incorrect in saying so. That is because the Rockaway Beach branch is city land. The city decides what they want to do with it, and right now, it is being used to build a Walmart Highline that will attempt to block transit on the branch. $46 million of city money is being spent to do so. You know who controls the city money? The city council. Mamdani. They have the authority to revoke or attach conditions to that funding. They have leverage, and saying that Mamdani doesn't have power in regards to this question is wrong, actually. Furthermore, mayors in recent history have gotten through subway expansion. The Hudson Yards extension was a city project, paid by city dollars. That was because neither the state nor the federal government wanted to pay for this. In fact, the governor at the time, George Pataki, couldn't care less about this. So, Bloomberg got creative and implemented tax increment financing to pay for this extension. In simple terms, building a subway makes the land more valuable. So you take advantage of that by taxing the increased value of that land to pay for the subway expansion. You don't want to emulate the Hudson Yards model to a T, because there is some questionable stuff in there. But the idea behind tax increment financing should be copied for Queenslink. Especially this parking lot near Aqueduct and Howard Beach. Turning this into mid-rises would turn a tax-draining piece of land into an economically productive land that would generate tens of millions of dollars per year. And over the course of a few decades, that would literally pay for Queenslink, on top of the other social benefits. I mentioned this because we keep hearing that there's no money and mayors can't extend subways. Yet Bloomberg was able to get a subway expansion through a literal economic recession that put this entire model into question. What I am saying is that when politicians, or really anyone, say no money, it means a lack of creativity. It means a lack of will. And lack of creativity and a lack of political will are two things we need less of in this government. I also find it completely pathetic to see the media continue to run cover for Queensway. You have this article from Secret NYC calling this Walmart Highline stunning, and where you have the vast majority of this article dedicated to praising Queensway and the Trust for Public Land. If Queenslink is ever mentioned, it is under Queenslink tension, where the article parrots MTA talking points that this is not effective, which is completely misleading. If you literally go to Appendix H of the Rockaway Beach branch study, you will find that the cost of the physical project is $1.9 billion. The remaining $6.2 billion is all soft costs and contingencies, which is basically unheard of. A 77% soft cost to total cost ratio has no precedent, even for MTA standards. Even their latest 125th Street subway proposal, which is so astronomically high, only clocks in at about 43%. So using that, we're talking about a $3 billion project, not an $8.1 billion one, nor $5.9 billion. And those ridership projections, They were modeled off of a train every 10 to 15 minutes on Queenslink. The reason behind this? Well, we don't want to cut service to 67th Avenue. I am not joking. First of all, that is inconsistent because in their 8-train study, they proposed 10 trains per hour at Nostrand and Kingston Avenue. I know they might take that back, but it has not been out of the realm of possibilities for the MTA to allegedly run 6-minute service at rush hours. The same way that if you run a train every 6 minutes on Queenslink, you would have 6-minute frequencies at 67th Avenue. And it's not like 67th Avenue is some high-use station. It saw 1.7 million riders annually in 2024. But compared to Rego Park, the next station down, which saw 3 million riders in 2024, we are fine. And we don't even need to do that. Queenslink will reroute the M train away from Forest Hills. Rerouting the M away from Forest Hills means 9 less trains per hour that crews need to fumigate at Forest Hills. Because of that, Forest Hills can handle an extra 9 trains an hour. The question is whether the rest of the line can handle an extra 9 trains an hour, and the answer is yes. Local service is only 20 trains per hour, and the entire line can handle 30 trains per hour per track. This entire fear that the MTA has over cutting 67th Avenue service is irrational because it does not need to happen. Yet I am supposed to take what the MTA says about this seriously? Come on! I'll take what NYU says about Queenslink seriously, which puts the ridership at 75,000 because they consider these factors that the MTA cut out. At the very least, the cost breakdown is available for the world to see. Yet these so-called journalistic outlets can't even do the bare minimum when talking about stuff like this, which is to just read the study. It is right there. I assure you, you do not need a PhD in engineering to point out the countless inconsistencies in this study. This is a supposed democracy, and your taxes go to stuff like this. And being the supposed fourth branch of government, you have every right to question this. We cannot rely on the media. Most of them are utterly useless in being objective when it comes to Queenslink. We have to rely on ourselves. So if you haven't already, go send some letters to City Hall. Customize it. If you have sent letters, send them again. Flood their inboxes. Annoy them. Remind them that these politicians work for us and that they are only in power because of us. Tell them that Queensway will block Queenslink. End of story. As always, keep it civil. There is still time, and we need to use that time to our advantage. Build the Queenslink and no way with Queensway. Give us our transit back.